I'm CraigO, and join me on my adventures with CraigO's cryptocurrency as we cover the blockchain, Web3, NFT, and cryptocurrency technologies. Interviewing the best in the industry, giving tips and tricks, and also sharing with you projects that I'm most excited about.
You're tuning into CraigO's Crypto Corner, the best in Web3, blockchain, NFT, and cryptocurrency technology. Great reviews, incredible interviews with the leading people in the Web3 ethos, and just the general things Web3. First, I want to welcome everybody in on Twitter Spaces. We're going to have a great show today, Facebook and YouTube Live, but let's get right to it with the Daily Ralpha with Ralph Quintero. Ralph, I am infinitely curious as to what is going on this week in the wonderful world of Web3. What's up, my friend?
I love that, brother. What's up, my friend? And you are absolutely spot on. Alpha is infinite curiosity. That's how you learn in this space. That's how I've learned in this space. And I've got 5 little things to go over with you guys today as far as the update. And hopefully it'll spark some curiosity and get our brains working for this episode today. So today's the last day to play Dookie Dash. As you know, volume has been super steady on the sewer passes, but I'm very, very curious to see what happens after the game ends. So game will end sometime today, I believe, later on this evening. But they've already announced, Yuga already announced the other side Legends of Mara, which is a 2D experience powered by ApeCoin, which I don't know if it's going to be a game or if it's going to be something else, but that's definitely going to be something interesting and something I'm paying a lot of attention to. The next thing I'm very excited about is that Doodles is finally communicating. And Craig, you and I have talked about that a lot in terms of as a flagship project. You know, they've done a really crappy job in terms of general communications, but they finally gave updates on Doodles 2. They hired a new head of brand marketing who comes from Twitter, and she's been very good about communications in her previous roles. They also teased updates coming soon on Pharrell's involvement in the project. And if you remember back to NFT NYC, that's when they announced that he was going to be involved in some regard with the project. We don't know exactly how, but we're about to find out soon. So as a longtime holder and someone who's been super vocal about their lack of communication, this makes me very, very happy. Let's see what else we got. Checks is on an absolute tear. And we talked about that here several weeks ago when it was just sitting down at a very, very low floor price. Floor price this morning was above 2.5 ETH. And even though it's actually retracted a little bit throughout the day, there's a lot of people asking whether this could potentially be the next CryptoPunks. I don't know what you guys think, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. In terms of upcoming drops, there's a drop happening tomorrow called Strangers HQ that I'm paying very close attention to. It's an OpenSea partner project. And I'm really curious to see how it's going to develop because it's a project for travel enthusiasts and it's meant to, kind of turn the stale industry loyalty programs on its head. So they're going to have what they're calling a social staking system that essentially they call it boarding, in line with the whole branding around travel. And it's a system that's going to identify who's utilizing their project as their PFP and award points on chain to the wallet and individual, not the asset itself. So pretty interesting. I'll definitely be minting one tomorrow to follow along because I love cool applications of tech like that. And then finally, you guys know I love my tools. I review a ton of them for the Daily Ralpha. So I recently started beta testing a new app called Soho, which I'm really liking so far. It's a mobile app that you can use to track your portfolio, manage alerts, track trends. So it's similar to Floor app, which you guys know I love. And so far, I've been really impressed with the UI UX, and I'll report back as soon as I have more time to play with it. But so far, so good. And
Ralph,
that's the daily.
I love it. And I love it. Guys, go subscribe. You see that screen. Simple. It's easy. And by the way, it's absolutely free. So, Ralph, I just want to ask you a couple quick things. I'm going to look into Strangers. But I think if we were to look at Jack Butcher coming out of absolutely nowhere. I didn't hear about him maybe until 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that was probably 2 weeks after he was making some news with this idea around checks, which I think is really a culture thing in this Web3 space and the certification check around Twitter. So brilliant. Who was he before? How did he come out of obscurity? I haven't done a lot of due diligence on him. And then the second question to that is a buyback in on checks if it goes below 2 ETH. Is that something you're thinking about, not financial advice?
So I'll start with the second part of your question. Yes, not financial advice. DYOR, do your own research. I'm looking at sub 2 ETH as an entry point into checks again. I think we'll see some swings back and forth, especially as the burn mechanism for the project starts. But Jack Butcher's been around for a really long time. I've actually been a fan of Jack's since before Web3. I've been following him for years. He runs a company called Visualize Value. He's a very well-regarded communicator. He's established a framework that he also calls Visualize Value that helps you to effectively communicate with a small amount of words and powerful visuals. So I've been a subscriber of his for a long time, and this isn't his first foray. Checks is not his first foray into the NFT space. He's actually launched a couple of one-of-ones and a couple of other, I would say, fairly successful projects. So, you know, when he came into Checks as a broader open edition, I was very curious. I minted two myself. I've already sold one. I'm holding on to one right now. But I think it's a phenomenal project that could potentially have some legs.
I love it. I love it. And just a last thing before we get in today's special guest, Dookie Dash, you know, here's my thought around it. You play this video game, you know, I'm still very bullish on ApeCoin long term just because of the Yuga ecosystem. Anything that you want to add on to that before we get into today's amazing festivities with Mr. Stephen Miller?
No, so there's been all kinds of rumors floating around that there's been like pro gamers messing with the gamificate or gamifying the experience, and Yuga has been very vocal about the fact that they're going to invalidate all of those wallets that have either cheated or gamed the system. So once the game is done, I'm going to be very curious to see where the scores fall, what that means for the ecosystem or where it goes. But like you, I'm bullish on Ape, right? They're building an entire ecosystem around that, or an entire economy around that token. There's people that are accepting it for projects. I think it's going to come into much bigger play once other side really launches. So I'm curious to see where that goes.
I love it. I love it, Ralph. So that's awesome, guys. If you're not following the Daily Ralph, you need to get on that. And by the way, it's absolutely free to get his newsletter every day. It keeps me posted on the latest and greatest in Web3. Aside from CraigO's Crypto Corner, and I'm so lucky to have Ralph here. All right, my co-host, Mr. Meta Matt, how are you, my friend?
Good. How are you doing? Looking forward to chopping up with Mr. Steve Miller again on Friday.
I am too. And I want to say to everybody that's on Twitter Spaces, go and retweet the room. Let's share. We have great content today. You just got some great alpha from Ralph Quintero of the Daily Ralpha. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to a true pioneer in Web3 arena, Mr. Stephen Miller. He's everywhere, involved in multiple communities, and hosting 2 key spaces as commentator, bringing insight and vision to all that is possible. He's sharing his thoughts and speculating on the current and future values of ENS domains on the Shark Tank, and discussing digital asset evolution with the on-chain monkey community on OCM After Dark on Thursday evenings. You know, it's funny how sometimes it's just a simple piece of art, like a beautiful JPEG, that brings 2 people together that become friends. Steve and I have had the connection, and we're always discussing, strategizing through DMs, texts, and phone calls on how digital assets are ever evolving in this space. A lot of communities are trying to create a grand vision for the future, but it's not always easy to keep people engaged. With overwhelming number of tokens being launched in the 4th quarter of 2022, I am always turning to Steve, along with some of my other people, for expert advice and insight into the strategy and community cohesion. He's always ahead of the curve, with a unique perspective on the latest trends in this exciting field. GM, Steve, how are you, my good friend?
GM, Craig, so good to be with you guys today. I am really looking forward to this. I'm having a great day so far, and it's only getting better this morning being with you on CraigO's Crypto Corner, man.
Whew, I love that, man. That makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. By the way, I'd like to do a quick screen share for those that are not engaging with Mr. Stephen Miller. You need to. First off, super insightful when it comes to strategy, really doing a deep dive and reading, and we're going to have a great episode. So if you're not following him, go follow. I wish it were the engagement button. I'm going to put that in Elon Musk's little suggestion box that maybe you can change it up. But I want to start with something that really had me fascinated. ENS Maxis, where are we going? This storybook sizzle is quite engaging, and it goes down a funnel of many different stories, and I'm a big fan of the community. I hold 7 of these amazing tokens in their ecosystem. All right, Steve, break it down to me. So this week it was funny. They were going to have this big news, and I want to do a quick screen share before Steve gives me this commentary because I'm really curious to hear his thoughts. But if you can, Tony, just there we go. Screw up the screen share. Share up the screen share. But they did this big announcement. They had a really incredible writer. I don't know who the writer is, but phenomenal at creating that excitement and engagement. What was the big announcement from your end? How was it perceived? And not a FUD, but just of thought or conversations, some things they kind of went back on. And I'm a big fan of this community. I want to be very clear on that. But what were your thoughts transparently?
I was going to say, before I share my transparent thoughts, I was looking down at the Twitter space just now, checking in to see if they were in, because I'm not quite sure if they're going to like what I'm about to say. But I've never been one to hold my tongue. I'm not going to start now. I'm also not going to be here to give anything other than just honest feedback today. What you hear from me across this space is just going to be straight away from me, the way I operate. And when I read through the announcement from the Maxi's team, I think that it was nothing short of a letdown. It was a lot of buildup for a couple days. Everybody was highly anticipating this move on Monday morning. And all of a sudden, it came that we wanted to start to build up further Twitter engagement, further rating. And when you hear that, it's just like, when you've given us a comic, you've given us a story, you've given us a rocket ship, all of a sudden when you build it up to, we're going to raid Twitter and try to emulate Shiba Inu, it kind of just sticks you. So to me, it was a little bit of a letdown, but I'm with you, man. I still back the project entirely. I think that I still own 7 or 8, just like you. And I've been there since day one, man. I minted it. I'm not getting out. I'm not even remotely concerned about the project. But in terms of just intermediate, how the attention economy works, I'm a little bit concerned because I think that there's been a little bit of public distaste with it, if you will.
How important is, the big conversation around doxing? It's something I talk to Ralph a lot, Meta over here. Doxing to me is important because they're identifiable. Like, who I am, that you can, communicate with me and have a conversation. And I love that feedback that you gave, right? Here's critical feedback, but it's honest feedback. It's transparent feedback from someone such as you that's respected in the space. And furthermore, you're still bullish on the project, as am I. I love the community. I love what all the spaces are doing, the green and the red spaces. I want to be very clear on that. But when you look to that, how important is knowing who the founders are? Is that important to you?
I mean, look, I think that this space is changing their perspective on it quickly. There was a time when we went from it's okay to be anonymous to then we trust no one unless they're doxxed, to now we're kind of going back to you can't trust anybody. So just try to remain skeptical positively and continue to evaluate on newer metrics that make sense, that are more trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
But I would say in this specific instance, because of the intent, because it was a free mint followed by 0 royalties, like that combination, I mean, nobody was doing that. Nobody. Why? Right. Because everybody wants to make money. So I'm surprised the team took that angle, but that was kind of, to me, the trade-off for entire team anonymity there.
Right.
So I think they did the right thing, but I'm curious because, again, just across the idea of attention economy, right? That's what we live in here. I'm starting to like casually test the idea of myself being an attention economist. I'm curious from your angle, because you're so deep in the space too. Like, what was your read on the announcement on Monday, and what are your thoughts on the exact question that you just threw my way? Because I think that it is a really interesting point right now.
I love it. I felt disappointed. I wasn't angry, but I was kind of like, especially in this opportunity market, if it's like birthday, or a special holiday, I want to be, cognizant of everyone. I felt like, wow, you could have like blown the socks off of everyone. And yeah, it might have cost something. And I understand, listen, the founders, there is something to gain. When we do something nice for someone else, the best selfish I always say to be is that you did it so you could feel good about yourself. You could feel better, but you did something that made an impact to someone else. And I was like, these founders aren't stupid. And there's a lot of key elements there, such as like the ENS symbol, that goes around the PFP. You had to have permission for that. So these guys are high up, and they could have actually dropped a bunch of money on the community in an airdrop or a different type of specialized token that could have had a limited edition. Those types of things I was expecting to see. Would it have been great if it was my birthday of all birthdays and somehow I got dropped $8,000 like they did for the ENS domains, a year and a half ago? That would have been phenomenal. And that would have drawn attention, and that would have gotten things going fast. Because they asked the question, what if we drop these tokens? It's kind of like, yeah, that to me is where I felt let down. It's kind of like, I don't want to say mislead, but I was kind of like, what's going on? And I'm friendly with them in the DMs. I'm still looking forward to the swag. They actually okayed a free shirt. I'm very transparent. And I said, guys, give me a hoodie. I'm a handsome guy. I may be out, for coffee with the wife. I'm going to need the hoodie, the cup of coffee. They're going to see ENS and be able to say, I'm going to build one of the best BFP collections in all of Web3. But that didn't happen.
But really quick, Craig,
yes.
I know Steven mentioned this is a free mint. They have no royalties, definitely under promising, kind of over delivering for a while now. Where like the tokens for the airdrops, how are they, Steven? Maybe you might know a little bit more about this. How are they founders making money off? Like, how can they promise anything if they're not, no royalties? They didn't make anything off of the mint. Like, how can they promise anything almost?
There's a couple of different ways, actually, Matt. And I appreciate the ask. I think that to be asking those types of questions are what's going to really differentiate people in the space in terms of how they think about Web3 at large, right? What is the opportunity? And with the ENS Maxis, it's really clear on two sides. One, they're huge about this not just being about a PFP project. It's about ENS. So to them, they're all about enhancing the ENS community, not just from their PFP, but to the ENS token,
right?
The ENS domains in general. And there's a lot of value that can be increased there. They're not trying to be extractionist. They did keep a treasury. Okay. So they did retain a bunch of tokens for themselves.
Yep.
But reasonably so, right? I think it's a fair trade-off. So that down the line, should they decide they want to get a little bit of capital in hand to continue to enhance the project, they have that opportunity, right? And that's fair. So they have a lot of opportunity. They've got a wallet that is stocked up with ENS domains that they could theoretically liquidate at any point.
Sure.
So they've got plenty of opportunity there for revenue.
Yeah.
And again, if they expand on the value and do build up the ENS token over time, that's going to also pad their wallet a little bit. So they've got a lot of opportunity to make money in this one for sure. I'm excited to see where it goes.
And that's a great point, Steve. Like, and that's why I say like 3 mint, 0. That's great. And by the way, I love the ENS Maxi community and I respect the founders and they're super transparent in regards to communicating and they're always in the spaces. I want to be very clear, but this is honest feedback. I do want to hop over in a couple of things. First off, I want to say hello to everybody in spaces. And guess who's in spaces, Steve? Can you guess? PR guitar guy. Yeah. Mr. Chris, Nyan Balloon. So we're actually going to be talking about you today. I also see LordPunk.eth in there. I also see who else? Good Things. What's up, my good friends? Matt Swayze, Dr. Crypto NFT. Yeah, we've got some good people in the space. So really happy to see you guys. Please retweet the room. What I do want to talk to you about next is another very strong community, one that I got in very, very early on, which is the On-Chain Monkey community. Tony, can we do a quick screen share? Thank you, sir. Their battle cry of iRise is phenomenal. And I just sometimes on my off time, if I'm not doing content creation, say I'm just relaxing, just maybe listening to some music, I'll actually go back and I'll just give everybody an iRise. And I love respect, integrity, sustainability, and experimentation. Ooh, I almost tripped up on that one. That battle cry to me has been so powerful in building their brand. Talk to me a little bit about iRise and then overall, you run a very powerful space, which is OCM After Dark. We'll talk a little bit about that. But when you think about iRise, how important is that battle cry for a community to be incredibly cohesive?
So now we're getting into my bread and butter here. I live for this stuff, Craig, and you know that. Like, to me, I think that the Rise ethos is a really, really big deal. And frankly, it's one of those things that, projects just don't have outside of On-Chain Monkey for my experience. And again, I've been in this space and I know we didn't lead with this. I've been in this space like full time since the beginning of 21, but I go back beyond that to 2017. I've been paying attention to the space acutely since then. And since January 21, I've been full time in it. So getting the chance to see the evolution of all of these different parts of the market, watching, how ENS came into prominence across 2017 to 2020, and now even getting the chance to see more of these PFP communities come to be, rise and seeing projects take on a real like a values system. It's unreal. Like, that's the only way that I can say it, man. Like, it's absolutely unreal because it gives the entire community something to rally around, right? But one thing that does need to be said is like those values can evolve. They can evolve. They can become new. They can take on new meaning. They
Right.
just this like in the last 2 weeks, they announced that they've officially evolved the Rise ethos to replace the E. It's not that they're not still about experimentation, but this community is now trying to lean further into the idea of enrichment. And that is a really beautiful thing because they're not just pitching enrichment by way of what they can do for their holders, but enrichment also for the community, for each other, right? They have the program called Monkey Misfits that's all about health enrichment. They have, yes, the assets that they plan on growing for their community, which would be wealth enrichment. But enrichment like really does mean a lot of things. I always say, just like you do, that your network is your net worth.
Yep.
That's an additional type of enrichment because this community has some of the most incredible leaders in Web3 that you could possibly like try to get access to or to have the opportunity to network with. And to me, that's the big value behind OCM After Dark, right? Is the enrichment of your network, connecting with the people that are really going to allow you to go further in whatever your line of work is, whether that's Web3 or otherwise. It's an incredible community. I love the ethos, and truly, it's probably the community that I have closest to my heart in Web3.
Steve, I always thought the iRise was just like a, ape together strong. I thought it was just like a saying, but is it like an acronym now, or like it stands for something? Because I'm for someone looking outside looking in, I have no idea what it means. I just figure people are just saying it like, yay, but it sounds like it's more than just that.
It is.
So Rise, exclamation point Rise is R, respect, I, integrity, S, sustainability, and now E, enrichment. And that acronym really is speaking to the values of the project. That's the base. That's the root of it all. That's what unites the community, because the only way to really have a long-lasting community is to ensure that they're connected by values. And that's what this has done. It's not just we're connected because we have monkey pictures and play around in the sewer. It's that there's something more. There's an impact that we can have all together because we share common values.
I love the fact that it went from, I believe I'm correct on this, right? Experimentation to enrichment, right?
Yep.
And the idea, and by the way, for Matt, since he doesn't have any on-chain monkeys yet, I'm sorry, OCM community, or any karmas. And we definitely were talking about strategy. I know exactly what I'm getting. I won't say it out loud, but that is one of those communities that, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, you're going to be holding digital gold. I personally believe, I believe you believe it the same. I do want to hop into another part of our conversation, which is there's a huge difference between podcasting and Twitter Spaces. And that is something that very quickly I'm having to acclimate to, because as a host for Alternative Finance on Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard, which I'll share in a little bit, I watch how incredible of how really your innate ability to know when people are speaking, their cadence, kicking the conversation around. My friend Easton Gladney from X1st said it perfectly. He was the first one that said it where it resonated. He goes, Craig, we know we have a successful spaces when we're getting the community to talk to each other and it doesn't fly off the handle into topics that divide people. And you really run some really powerful spaces to keep everybody together, to do that in such a way that it gels, that it's allowed you to be the head of OCM After Dark. And then yesterday, an incredible Twitter Spaces with Jimmy.eth, which I'll let you tell us a little bit about him, on ENS Shark Tank, which is your baby. So how did you learn? Were there people that you learned from as far as tips? Are there some strategy for people who are in the audience? Because the audience is also the community. They're the ones that get to come up and speak and communicate. That's how rooms grow. That's how the space grows. And that's how they get to share their excitement with their family, friends, and their network.
Yeah. So again, like there's so many different things I would love to like touch on there that I know I'm going to miss at least one of them.
I'll remind you.
So let me just say that the evolution that we're seeing right now in social media with the introduction of social audio is nothing short of revolutionary. Okay. I know it started on Clubhouse, sure, but Web3 has found a home on crypto Twitter. And a lot of the time we say this idea in the branding world that you have to meet your audience where they are. And I do believe that social audio is going to be the mechanism with which you're able to create deeper connections with your community. So when I think about my background in podcasting and how I learned, my craft in that world, because it is very different from
Right.
social audio, to your point, I've had to translate those skills and figure out how they can work not only in transition to social audio, but also how you can take the skills that you learn in social audio and apply it to becoming a better podcaster, right? It does go both ways. It's not just, one way to social audio. So my history with it, I was really blessed. I got the chance to basically learn directly from one of the guys that's in the industry referred to as one of the godfathers of podcasting. Shout out to Evo Terra. Really, really great dude. Tons of knowledge in the world of podcasting, what it takes to make a great show, but also how to grow it. I would have never in a million years thought that I was going to grow a show to the point where it had this enormous audience that ultimately has become a show that I'm now EPing on as an exec producer. I'm not going to say the name of the show right now because it does include a swear word for the folks at home that may have kids listening. But that show is doing over 1 million downloads, and it's a privilege to be able to say that we've grown that show to what it is today. When I've looked at what it took to grow it, I'm starting to deploy more of those tactics and my social audio experiments through ENS Shark Tank and on OCM After Dark. But the structure element is like the thing that I think really does ground it. It's keeping the conversation authentic. It's keeping it on track. And that's what to me makes for a better Twitter space, is keeping authenticity in the space, but without getting too far outside of the lines of where you really want to see the conversation go and flow to. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And I think, Matt, you were going to say something in just a second. What I wanted to say is to everybody that's in Twitter Spaces, one of the things that we try to do here on the podcast is have a controlled Twitter Space environment, and it's been great. But I want to just say, if anybody wants to speak at any point, just raise your hand. Renee, who's behind the scenes, will just ask what your question is, just to make sure, again, we want to just kind of field what our conversations. It's a little more of a controlled environment. But I do, Tony, really quick, want to do a quick screen share. And then, Matt, I want to hear what you have to say, my good friend. So this Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be having on Alternative Finance Will, who is the CEO of Cryptoys, not Crypto Toys, just saying Cryptoys. Don't ever say the other word around him. So he's not listening in today. At least I don't see him on the spaces. But it's a great conversation that's going to be worth having. They're going to completely disrupt the Web3 toy industry, and they have a major partnership with Mattel. So that's going to be powerful. Shout out to X First, Don, Matt, and Easton. Much respect. And let's come back to Mr. Steven. But before we do, Matt, what did you want to say?
Yeah, just kind of going off of controlling a room, and this is not to get political, but I don't know if you saw recently, either you and the probably on Twitter, because we're all on social media. I know Biden lost control of the State of the Union address. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that.
It looked like the crowd was like it was like a WWF ring, like something like Vince McMahon just came out, like it was me all, like it was pretty bad out there. So for you, I just want to know, Steven, like after watching that, the grandest stage of them all, how do you control these, the guests coming up? How do you, because I know everyone's voice matters, how do you kind of differentiate between respecting someone's voice and then realizing when everyone else is as listening also does matter and having to respect their time as well?
It's a really good question, Matt. Like a really, really good question. It's never easy is the one thing that I need to say off the jump. But in the words of my buddy Flexter, who I know you've had on the show in the past, he's one of my co-hosts in the ENS Shark Tank, he always says that there are two things in my space that I don't talk about. I don't talk about politics, and I don't talk about religion. And it's reasonable, right? Because you're setting boundaries, you're setting certain parameters in which you can actually control said space. When it comes down to it, in my spaces, there's one thing that I don't tolerate, and it's disrespect.
Yeah.
And I've seen it, and I think it's something I'm gonna probably touch on later in the show. But the spaces where you see like disrespect coming in mass, they're doing it because they're trying to monetize off of the idea of sensationalism. And I don't believe that that's what really can make for a great community. I think that great communities are made on authentic interactions, respect, and treating each other with dignity. at the end of the day, we're all just human beings trying to do the best we can. And on social media, that can get ugly. It has gotten ugly.
Mhm.
And you look at what happened in the State of the Union last night, and it's ugly. It's really, it's not a fun business. And I feel for the politicians in there that are really doing their best, but decorum is something that's been out the window for more than a couple of terms now. So I think that in spaces, if there's a lesson to take from it, it's decide what the boundaries are that you want to set and try to maintain a certain standard.
You know,
Best that you can do.
Steve, I would just remind everybody, you know, when you're in Twitter Spaces, we're united in this Web3 front. I mean, I understand there are things outside our life that, you know, culturally, from a religious standpoint, certain things can push people away, but we come together in these spaces and we're so early. And so that is a Web3 family. So, you know, the other night I was in a Spaces and it literally, the Spaces was going great. I was inviting people. I was like, this is great. And it went off the rails and my heart sunk because I was like, we're doing there's such a great thing that's going on, and people got very excited because this space was growing rapidly with people. And I want to remind people, come together, don't go apart, and you can have a conversation where you can disagree with someone and it's still okay. And that's why I just sit right on the fence on a lot of things, and I just listen to people and okay, I nod my head because I want people to know that it's safe to have a conversation with me privately and then to have an open conversation or dialogue in public that promotes Web3. And I completely agree with Flexter in setting that boundary.
Craig, but drama is what gets the views, right? And Steven, you were talking about, you know, the difference between the, you know, the two types of podcasts. Maybe I think you might have been talking about someone who I'm also thinking about when it comes to entertainment versus providing the value that you were talking about. Like how do you, I guess, because, you know, there are a lot of podcasts, there are some Twitter spaces out there where entertainment, you know, maybe being disrespectful is what is the biggest focus. And they get a lot of views, some of those podcasts, because like I said, drama does get views. How do you, what do you think about those types of shows out there in the Web3 space? I know Web3 is all about building each other up and kumbaya and all that. What do you think about people who are using that type of drama for entertainment factor?
So I want to come to that in 1 second. There was something that Craig had mentioned that I think is a really, really good point to make, and I somehow completely glossed over it. When you talk about social audio and you think about the experiences we are having, like there's kind of two base formulas for a really successful space. There is that which you kind of can maintain order, where you are, you know, welcoming people up to stage, encouraging them to raise their hand when they've got something to say, speak. That way you can maintain some semblance of respect for one another for when you have like a one mic environment. The other is these more organic conversations where people just can simply come off mute, talk, and occasionally you get that, you know, type of layering where it's people talking over one another and you're trying to get a word in edgewise. There is a difficulty there, right? And I think that's one of the big things, because Craig and I were in the same space with what he was talking about. And when you don't have a one mic environment, I think that's how things can get a little bit out of whack. And it's not that you can't recover from it. It's just a question of, as a host, do you have what it takes to completely flip the script, twist the knob, and redirect everybody back to the right topic? Now, Matt, back to your question. I have such a hard time with this one because it is a really good point. And I think that my answer to it's very, very simple. I would rather have 4,000 followers and know that without a doubt, they can count on me for my character, my values, and I can be closer connected to them than simply spout off at the mouth and disrespect and talk shit on people when they're not even in there to defend themselves, and have 25,000 followers because people like, you know, the reality TV of it all. That doesn't feel good to me. That's not who I am. That's not my character. And I refuse to do that. That said, in the Web3 space, if you want to stay informed, the unfortunate thing is you have to be in those spaces from time to time. And I've had to learn that.
I love that. And I agree with you. And that's where I was watching that host was kind of hiding for a minute, thinking about what the next plan was. What was the next words that were going to leave his mouth? Because there was nothing that could connect with everyone. And I want to bring people together. My podcast, Your Spaces. We want to unite people because this is such a small family and we are inclusive in that regard. We want to bring people in. This is a family. So I I agree with you completely. I do want to talk a little bit about your past and how it parallels. And so what is the parallel between your experience bringing the SaaS platform to market in the retail food sector back in 2015 to what you are currently doing now in blockchain-based technology?
So the connection's a little bit tricky, but I think I can get you there. Back in 2015, I started a company that was really focused on solving a major problem in food retail, and it was the fact that when you look at the data from a managerial perspective in stores, whether you're at like your local grocer, whether it's a Kroger, a Publix, a Fry's, whatever it is, right? They have data that is highly siloed. And that's deeply problematic if you're an operator because you need to be able to drive correlations. You need to understand data across a whole bunch of different, verticals, whether you're talking about shrink, your sales margins, your product placement, your product mix, all of that, right? Things that in Web3 you don't give a shit about. Let's be honest. The correlation is that we solved a problem there not using blockchain.
Right.
That blockchain today has the ability to actually solve arguably better than we did it back then. So when I was, bringing that product to market, that SaaS platform, it was directly being sold to the business up top, and then it would be rolled out to all the stores underneath it. Today, if we had that system blockchain integrated and we could also convince this ancient industry that operates a very old guard to integrate their data on chain so that they could actively track all that information live and be able to bring additional data flows in using Chainlink, it would be a game changer. It would make so much sense. But for what we were doing back then, it was a lot of plain English analytics, trying to use natural language processing to tell people in the stores in their own type of understanding what they needed to do to really resolve bigger problems the data was showing. That was the bigger point back then. Today, the blockchain has immutability, it has transparency, and also it has provenance to it, right? All of those things can add a greater degree of trust in the data that we had in our software back then that we still have in our software today. But again, I think that it's going to take industries time to transition to the blockchain. The food retail sector is not even close.
But see, this is what you just said, and everybody listening in on Twitter Spaces, when you go home and you're just talking to your family or your friends or your colleagues and like, oh, what are you doing with the crypto and the digital assets, or they call them NFTs, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. I think it's an important thing. You just gave an incredible example of your past, how it relates to the current, the fact that most Web2 based businesses, products and services, traditional companies can find the value in blockchain-based technology because of how it functions. And I would say for more people to learn about that, and we're going to have a couple subsequent after this podcast. Then we have Kevin DeGods on next week. And then the week after, we're going to be doing toolkit strategy. We're going to go into Etherscan. We're gonna do a lot of really cool things to talk about smart contracts. People can understand the value of what they're actually doing. But that's a perfect example. So when you're talking to your family and your friends later, and you just mention that story of what Steve did early on in 2015 and how it's applicable right now, but how old guard doesn't want to recognize that, that's concerning. And I'm just going to go into one more conversational piece, and then Penny Boys is going to do their update with Mr. Meta Matt. All right, so your full-time Web3, what's the educational content that you're starting to provide more of that you believe will make the difference to get more people involved in this new aged internet? If we don't call it Web3 or blockchain-based technology, how do we get more people involved? What's that? It's not going to be the latest degen play, that's for sure, because that doesn't create credibility, especially when the floor drops on something and people go, oh, it's a scam. But what is that one thing for you when you're talking in your spaces that you think is important that should get drilled into people's heads so that they go out and they share it in Web2?
It's a really, really good question. I think the one thing is that the opportunity is tremendous, and I feel like that's still a very degen thing to say. So I'm gonna kind of pull back on that a little bit, right? There is a lot of opportunity here in Web3, but it's opportunity to expand on what you already know from Web2 and simply improve upon it, right? And you can think about all of these different things that we've come to know and become really comfortable with in Web2. And you can start to imagine how it can evolve by adding things in like ownership, digital ownership. That to me is exciting. And I think that a lot of people are starting to get that. But in terms of my own content, I'm starting to really dig into newer places to onboard individuals in the space, whether that means we're talking about ENS and how an ENS domain can very easily simplify the wallet experience for individuals who are just for the very first time getting their own Ethereum address outside of a centralized exchange, right? Getting to connect the dots with individuals like that, it's going to be huge because the wallet touch point is such an enormous barrier right now.
Yeah,
it really is. Do you want a 40 character string of like letters and numbers and say, yeah, no, that's what it is. I know exactly what those numbers and letters are. You don't. You're lying. You will always lie about that if you say that you are. Having a name that's simple, right? Shout out to Ralph Quintero, RalphQ.eth, right? StephenMiller.eth, CraigO.eth. All of those things, they add up to simplifying and making an experience easier. So if you choose to custody your own assets, you have the opportunity, right? Back to opportunity, to take it into your own hands and have an easy, simple experience. Just one example, right? I love teaching about that type of stuff. But beyond that, I like getting into topics like art, helping people understand not just from the collector perspective, but from the creator perspective, why artists should try like just dipping their toe into the world of Web3 and into NFTs, right? I don't talk about it a lot, but my mother is actually an artist who really was held back in her ability to be an artist. Her father, my grandfather, told her that she could not go to art school because it was not a career path that was going to, open up a life of opportunity for her.
Yep.
After he passed, she finally decided to pursue her art. And today, like, has actually shown her art, publicly. And I keep telling her, hey, we should really talk about this and try to, see if we can get you to just dip your toe into the blockchain world, because realistically, it helps you reach a much bigger audience. It may resonate on a different level, but also it ensures that nobody is stealing your work, right? There's humongous value behind, what NFTs unlock for art. So getting a chance to teach people stuff like that is huge too. But the community element's my biggest one, man. I love talking about what NFTs and especially membership-based projects are doing for the expanding of communities.
And we're definitely gonna talk about the utility, and I love the passion and the drive that you have, the consistency. And I do see that Chris is in there from Nyan Balloon. He is one of the ultimate meme artists, and he is a legend in the space. So guys, go and give him a follow. We are going to talk about him because one of our big connections was CryptoFace.me, I believe, .me. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about Nyan Balloon because you were the one that turned me on to that. So just letting you know, Chris, it's this handsome guy on the screen right here. But before we do that, Tony, cue up that screen share for PB alerts. This is for our Web 2 friends. Hopefully they'll come into Web 3. And my man, MetaMatt, the floor is yours for a few minutes.
Yeah, the name of the game for today is education. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern at Penny Boy Stock Alerts, we have our graduation for our PBU alumni or PBU students who will now become alumni on Thursday. For those of you who don't know, we have over 50 free educational courses in our Discord. We specialize, as you see on the screen, stocks as well as crypto. We do some NFT education. We stay away from the alpha, though, as far as that goes. We do provide alpha, or in the Web 2 case, we call them alerts for stocks and crypto. But I'm really looking forward to the graduation. Like I said, education is the key. And we'll get into it later, hopefully later. I really am curious when it comes to education, learning some things from Stephen Miller. I personally, being a Web 2 head, or originally being a stock trader, I'm all about trading. I love the community. I don't really care about art, to be completely honest. I don't really care about art at all. But I love community.
I love this guy.
I love community. I love that aspect of NFTs. I love, the blockchain technology. But I like making money. I like trading these. And I think these ENS domains, from what Flex was telling us in the last podcast, it seems like such an interesting way to...
I'm not letting you hop forward. We're going to
trade. I want to talk about trading.
We're going to talk about ENS, Shark Tank, and the valuation. I love
the alpha. I want the alpha.
And by the way, PB alerts, go sign up. It's absolutely free. There's definitely a lot of value in there if you like the traditional stocks. If you don't, well, and you want the intermix, that's why you came here.
It's not free. We do have a free Discord, but the
Discord.
The premium is under PB alerts. If you do want 30% off, though, you can use code CraigO. It's code CraigO for 30% off if you want to go ahead and get the premium alerts, premium education, the master classes, It's really worth it though.
But I always say sometimes people want to just dip their foot in the Discord and just check it out, make sure that it's good.
The education
But
should
by the
be
way,
free.
I've been in there and it's held my attention, and I have never been a big stock person. So luckily enough, I get to have you here next to me. All right. So what I do want to shoot on is to the next thing, which is our Unite for Love. And since we've got Chris in here, he spent enough quality time. I do want to talk about his project. Well, I don't say his project, his presence in the space. And so I'm just going to tune this up. Steve, you with me? There you are. All right. So the balloons, the burning mechanism, we look on this, the manifold.xyz. Let's talk about how these artists are doing it. And here's a true legend in the space. And I have some feedback, I think a lot that's positive, and then maybe it's just generational from my standpoint of what I'm hoping to see further as far as content from different leaders in the space, such as him. So now that I've got his ear for a minute, hey, I'm gonna be honest, both pro and just a few things that I'd like to share. What are your thoughts on Nyan Balloon? How it launched, and just overall concerning Chris?
I think that all told, it was probably my favorite drop of the OE movement. And I would say, like, if I had a top 3 within the OE and timed edition role, it would have been the Nyan balloons. It would have been Proceed with Caution, which is what I like to call my biggest mistake of the entire OE movement. And last but not least, of course, Infinite Curiosity by some guy that was on the show earlier. Oh yeah, his name's Rolf Quintero. Big fan of all 3 of them. And I think that honestly, all 3 showcase very unique elements of the space and like how the OE movement kind of came to a really wonderful crescendo. But when I look at what the Nyan balloons did in particular, it did flip a couple things on its ear. But beyond it, just like kind of changing the way that, the redeem and the burn process worked, really liked the fact that it expanded on the story of an iconic meme, right? Everybody knows about Nyan Cat. You keep saying Nyan.
I do. I'm sorry.
Like, it's started to like infect my brain, so now I'm starting to say it the way you say it. We'll keep going back and forth on that one forever, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, it expanded on the story of the Nyan Cat. Like, I never thought Chris was going to do that, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So PR Guitarman, hats off to you. The one thing that I will say, and I know that you and I speculated on this a lot, Craig, about like how the burn was going to work for this one mystery drop on Saturday. And I knew that I knew exactly what it was going to be when it came. Again, huge shout out to Chris. Like, goddamn, great stuff across the Nyan Cat ecosystem. But I knew it was going to be the rainbow, right? I knew it was going to be a rainbow, pushing this little cat up into space with his balloon.
Yep.
I wanted it so bad. And I sat there and said to myself, I bet it's going to be another one of these full set burns where you're going to have to get each of the colors, and that's how you're going to get it. Makes sense. All the colors come into one, makes the rainbow you're going.
Rainbow.
Fun fact, I didn't end up getting the rainbow one because I didn't collect 3 of the red ones. It ended up being you had to burn multiple of the original piece, which, again, brilliant. It turned everything on its ear. People had to think differently for once. I like the shakeup, but I mean, you tell me what you thought, Craig. I'm curious about what your feedback on the entire experience was from your perspective.
See, and this is where our bonding has happened. This is where our friendship has grown, because it's really, I'd like to be in it for the money, but I also find that there are such opportunities, not just for my podcast, not just to have conversations with amazing individuals like you, but to be able to collect certain, I like to call them digital assets. And we're going to talk about sort of the verbiage, and we'll obviously get in the ENS. Don't worry, Matt. But I like to collect things that I believe, like if I have a silver bar, I'd rather have a balloon. And Chris, that's a big shout out to you, PR Guitar Guy, because I like where it can go. All right, so let me give you the feedback of what I'd like to see, Chris, since I've got your ear for just a minute. And by the way, my handsome face is on YouTube if you want to come take a look at me and just know who I am. I always believe in that real connection, that doxing. But I'd love to see him, and I know he wasn't feeling good after he actually got ill, and I believe he's on the mend. But I want to see more posts from you on strategizing what you want to see with the cats. With the balloons, and, talking about your collection. I want to see more about your history past on your Twitter, because I'm always following people. Again, like you, I'm immersed in this space. So I have 4 balloons, and you know, Steve, I called it out right. I've got a call that I'm going to make on a different artist that nobody is paying attention to, and there are a couple metrics as to why, more fundamental than technical, because I'm not your technical guy. I've got technical people around me like Ralph and Meta, but I would like to just see him doing more engagement so I can see where this is going to happen. But I said the green balloon. And I was right that the green balloon would have the least amount of supply. And we started off with, I think, 21,000 some number of red balloons. And I knew that the balloon at the end was what people were going to be FOMOing. They weren't going to be thinking going, it's the mid balloons that are going to have the least amount of supply, and that the balloon at the end would probably have more, and the red would never get finished off, not in this market. And if he had been last year, this would have been just insane, and you would have seen secondary sales that would have not made sense. But I value it in the artist doing 2 things. One is the technical aspect of launching, good marketing team, which I believe Chris has in spades. He also has a reputation. He's also a kind soul. I've listened to him on Twitter Spaces, and all I need to do is hear your voice once to know a little bit about who you are. That will tell me if I'm excited to invest in what it is that you're doing long term. And again, he's a legend in the space. So that's my thought. I just want to see more from him talking about his different collections, what he hopes to see this year, next year, and the year after. I want more from him in that blog content way, maybe some threads. That's what I want to see from a legend like this. And by the way, because he's a legend, he should bring in somebody who is specializing in threads that he knows, likes, and trusts within his network, because I think what he has is so unique, and it speaks to and if I hope I'm right on this, CryptoPunk content. And that brings us to our next thing.
Hey, real quick, I just want to interject one quick thing, and it was to the fact that with Nyan balloons, like, yeah, like there's unique engagement to it, right? And that's an important distinction, right? The fact that you have a burn mechanism or you have multiple burn mechanisms with other projects, that's not utility. Okay, it's important to make the distinction. That's engagement. That's you staying engaged with this artist community and staying engaged with the art. Utility is something altogether different. And it's important to make that distinction, because people lose track in this space because they want to make money, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But they lose track of the fact that they want the artist to provide some sort of utility. Folks, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but there is only one utility for art, and it's to evoke emotion. Period. That's the utility of art. I've said it on a number of different art-based spaces, you know, both to the creator and the collector. And it's something that, like, you can be an art investor and you can understand that. And it doesn't have to be more complicated. But don't be an investor who looks for more utility in art than that, because it's not going to be there. Look for engagement, sure. But that's just something worth keeping in mind.
I love that.
That's where the smart contract comes into play for the utility, other than just, oh, this looks like a nice piece of art.
Well, you know what? But I think it's right. The utility, the ultimate meta is the art. It's the artist. And my only want in the way of utility, if there was utility, is just more content to learn more about you and your storied past, because there's not a lot of that out there. So that to me is the utility. That's where I find value, right? So when I think of utility, is to find value. It doesn't mean I don't need another airdrop. I don't need tokens that you're going to launch. That's not that kind of thing. So I completely agree. And that's such a good point that you make, Steve. It's a strong point, because people have expectations and making money. And yeah, money's to make is great. But in this time, you're going to probably have some things in your wallet that at some point in the next 2 to 5 years are going to be, your mind's going to go numb and go, what? So it's good to learn about how to move in this space. It's great to see artists that are plugged in. All right. So the first thing that we had talked about, right, was, and do a quick screen share, Tony, if you don't mind. And I'll let you talk about this because I think it's incredibly important. CryptoFace.me. What do people need to know about this project, and why is it so under the radar? I just don't get it. I'm banging my head against the wall. Steve, help me. My head is sore.
CryptoFace.me was one of the first things that you and I really connected over, dude. And I still look back on it, I laugh a little bit, because it's such an interesting project. And I still am not sure why it's as slept on as it currently is. But I think it's probably because the minting experience itself is no longer open, right? I believe there's plans to reopen it here shortly. I think they're kind of like in an auction or a raffle off process for the remaining spots. but it's a project that the Illuminati DAO, which was one of the projects from Truth Collective, the parent of Goblin Town, that DAO had put some really big work in behind the scenes. A member of the DAO came forward and said, hey, I think I found something that's on chain that is an artifact, it's an avatar-based project that predates CryptoPunks. And I think every single person in the DAO kind of had a minute to just sit there and take that in and realize just how freaking enormous that is. So we looked at it. They did a further deep dive into it. We funded some additional research through through a development company, and they validated it that this in fact was an avatar project that predated punks by a couple months. And it's not a traditional 10K avatar project. It was one that actually gave you, the end user, the ability to become the artist of your own avatar. It was an avatar generator and creator where you could create your own avatar right on chain. It was a very, very cool, lean experience. Not a ton of bells and whistles, but the fact that it was so ahead of its time is what's really impressive about it to me.
I love that. And I agree with you completely. So cryptoface.me, go check that out. And by the way, there are secondaries. And I'm not sure if you can still mint. There was actually someone who told me a few weeks ago that he was able to mint a few of his on their platform. I don't know if that's the case. So I do know that it is secondary on OpenSea. That I'm very sure of.
Yep, it is. It is definitely available on the secondary right now. You can go check that out. Cryptoface.me, spelled exactly how you would think it is. And just keep your eyes peeled on it, because I know that the DAO has additional plans to market it. But in terms of how they wanted to roll out the initial set, it was to people who owned the Illuminati NFT. That was the big deal. So those individuals got the chance to mint first. Now they're headed into the next phase, and I think they'll start marketing it a little bit further and starting to push the envelope a little bit and piss off a lot of people when they start saying, this predates the punks. This is the earliest avatar project, because a lot of people will get opinionated on that.
Well, not only that, what you're going to see is an influx as the on-ramp to the highway of Web3 becomes easier. Some of these things that you hold, and I believe this might be one of the things, not financial advice, but I also love the fact of it being something special, because Web3 means something to me and you well beyond $1. But Don Paulo, shout out to you. He said, but the OCM DAO just crushes them all. And I can't disagree. Just saying, Don, shout out. I can't disagree. All right. Our ever-changing Web3 lexicon is moving away from just using the word NFT. We've talked about this, to digital assets, digital collectibles, which resonates with me, metaverse as it refers to land. And by the way, I'm a realtor in Connecticut. And also, I do study our national markets. So you have any questions related to real estate? Call me. Just DM me. Be like, oh, Craig, what's going on with the market? And I know people throughout the U.S. within my Remax brokerage. So a little famous show for myself. When we think about these difference of words, right? Why is this so important that the verbiage that we change it now within Web3 and we get away from the NFT word? Why? Is that done? And have we met a stop sign?
I'm not sure it's a stop sign. I think that realistically, verbiage changes over time. The lexicon is always evolving. I mean, when you think back to the evolution of music, right? You had, vinyl records for a while. You'd be spinning, vinyl. You would then move on to the MP3 era of having your very own iPod, your iPod Shuffle. But when you got into streaming, all of a sudden, people weren't talking about MP3s. They weren't talking about wax. They were talking about, I'm playing my music on my iPod. It got to be really simple.
Right.
We're right now in the phase with NFTs where it's too technical. It's people talking about it from the perspective of it's a file type, right? It's not a file type. Yeah, I know it's not a file type. The file type is what is actually on chain. It's a PNG or whatever. So yes, for the stickler at home that's listening, I know that it's not the file type, but that's the comp, right? So it has to naturally have an evolution here so that more people in the public can find it as easy to understand, right? There's still an aversion to NFTs. Some people think it's like an environmentally harmful thing. Not so, since proof of stake, but that needs to change. And NFTs have a sour taste in some people's mouths still because of that. So as we change things over, like I've really been a big advocate for what Reddit started, right? Shifting over for digital collectibles instead of NFTs. Talk about that part of the market. Shifting from NFTs as a generalization for all of art to crypto art and generative art on chain. You said it yourself with metaverse land. You can unpack it from there, but I only refer to digital assets when I'm talking about ERC20 tokens and coins. That's a digital asset to me. Everything else is either a digital collectible, crypto art, generative art, or like metaverse land. Or what I'm starting to experiment with is like digital, virtual digital goods as well. When it comes to like the items that you would wear from like a fashion company in the metaverse, that's what that would be.
Digital. I like that one too. That's a like fun word. And there's all these different plays on words. And Steve, you make a lot of really great points. And to me, maybe it's just because I'm 45. Like I think of digital collectibles, digital art. To me, to me, the word digital is just is ingrained in it. It sticks in my mind. We as a collective, I think we will change the narrative, but we can only do that. And coming back to our whole Twitter space conversation, when we stick on point, we're respectful to each other, and we speak with a level of kindness and empathy. Empathy is something I think in short order these days, and I remind myself every morning to say I'm so grateful that I have a beautiful, healthy family, that I have great friends like you, like Matt, like my friends, just my fellow dads. And I remind myself of that. I remind myself of being thankful for my health. Most importantly. So I think these are important things right now in the space. If we're gonna, we use the word degen very loosely, like, oh, I aped into this project and I'm a degen. I got in and out. I made money. Yeah, we're not in Vegas every day. And so part of this, spaces, and by the way, anybody in spaces that is listening, anybody on YouTube or Facebook, you have questions, or if anybody wants to come up, we like to do a little bit of interaction. We just want to know what the question is. And I'll look to you in a second, Renee. No, nobody. That's great. We just got a lot of listeners because you're dropping a lot of alpha. All right, let's talk about the ENS Shark Tank. My good friend Matt over here wants to know, how do we evaluate? And I want to start with the first one, right? We talked about it. I talked about it with Flexter. You actually, it was a fun competition. Flex, he's not listening today. I think I didn't see his beautiful panda, his ENS Maxi PFP. How do we evaluate Porsche.eth? I'm just going to start there. I mean, has anything changed, or is your valuation ceiling still the same? Let's talk about that.
Porsche.eth. There's so many companies out there that, like, if they only knew what they were sitting on, or if they only knew the actual value of an ENS domain, they would realize that they would be getting in dirt cheap right now. And I know that the last time you and I had spoken about it, I think we had came to the conclusion that like names like that are invaluable. I jokingly will just throw the Porsche 911 tag on it and say that it's worth 911 ETH right now. But there is actually no comprehensible value when you're talking about your own brand's identity. And that's one of my biggest things, man. Like, it's all about identity in this game, because you can do so much more with an ENS domain. You can truly deploy it as a site. You can use it as your Web3 identity if you're just trying to give somebody a wallet address. And now, because we're starting to break out into things like subdomains, you have the potential to issue a Porsche.eth subdomain to every one of your individual dealerships internationally. Right? I can go ahead and issue, if I had Porsche.eth, NorthAmerica.Porsche.eth. I can do Connecticut.Porsche.eth for any one of the dealers out there. And immediately they have a Web3 address that is identifiable to their brand. And on top of that, it is forever theirs as long as Porsche.eth continues to pay the renewal fee. So to me, it's invaluable. I will never put a true price tag on those big brands, but those big brands need to be onboarded into the space the right way. If they're not onboarded into the space the right way, and they don't understand the value of that identity piece, they're not going to stay, or they're not going to get the top benefit out of owning it.
Yeah, they had a tough launch with their digital collection, and they went back to the drawing board, and that just tells you that some of the right people didn't get around them to say, wait a minute, you've got 911, 959, you've got to be very specific on it. And so I understand why you would evaluate, Porsche.eth at 911 ETH, right? Nothing's really going past that 100 ETH floor as far as that's sort of like the ceiling valuation for right now, because there's not enough of the big companies coming in and purchasing. We have celebrities in the space, which Flexter had talked about. I love the fact that people will come on with their ENS domain and they'll pitch it. So let's talk about that, right? Someone comes on with their domain. What is one of the most notable ones that just comes to mind for you? And what did that look like?
After yesterday, man, like I'm not really sure that I have just one, which is it feels like such a cop-out answer. But like a huge shout out to the ENS Shark Tank community because they've been bringing nothing but heat for the last like 3 or 4 episodes. The type of quality step up we've seen in season 2, because we did 18 episodes last year and have just basically come back for our second season. The degree of quality we're getting submitted every single week is just getting to be a little insane. These names are so good week over week, and hats off to the community for stepping up in that way. But we like are starting to see names like on yesterday's show, like alter.eth. Shout out to Ada. She pitched an incredible domain yesterday. We look at names like actual.eth, right? A really solid dictionary word, 5 characters with a low carry cost. And again, there's a big distinction to be made there for those at home that are not totally familiar with ENS. If you register a 3-character domain, it's a $640 a year renewal cost, I believe. Then you move to a 4-character, it's about $120 a year. And then everything from 5 characters onward is about a $5 a year renewal cost. So when you get really high quality 5-character words that are dictionary words or acknowledgeable and recognizable terms, that's a big win because conciseness does pay. So actual.eth got an offer for 1.5 ETH live in the space yesterday. They were looking for a little bit more, so they decided to pass on that offer. But we make real deals in the tank. We do not F around. Okay. We helped get a lot of exposure for a lot of these bigger names. I.e. shooter.eth came in again a couple weeks back. And within the duration of the space, somebody had made an offer to that individual and it moved in the space, probably because we were talking about it live in the space. And to be able to have that type of impact for the people in our community is just, it's an amazing feeling because I love being able to give back to these communities.
Really quick, are you valuing, because like as a trader mentality, are you valuing these evaluating these based off like trends or based off of like what other domains like it's sold, like actual, for like maybe like actually sold, or like other words with that? Like, how do you value these? Because me, if I'm looking to buy something and if I'm trying to flip it or whatever, or even just have it make money for me over time, because I don't like to spend money on stuff that's not going to make me money if I'm in the market. How do I value, like how do I as a new ENS trader or investor or whatever you want to call it get into this and not just like overpay for a word?
So the big one right off jump is going to be familiarizing yourself with the tools that can help you get to that end result of actually knowing the value. A lot of people just don't do that. They just go on to OpenSea or try to register a domain straight away. Your highest ROI situation is going to be finding a name that you can register, because obviously if you're getting it at cost, everything from there is up, so long as you're not selling it for below what you registered it for, which I've seen people do that. I guess for tax loss harvesting or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh, tax loss harvesting. Well, I grabbed some good ETH at the end of the year. It's what, by the way, grabbed my ENS Maxis. I love the fact that you'd speak of these strategies, right? So we talked about actual.eth. And what was the other ETH, by the way, that you mentioned?
The other one was alter.eth yesterday. And again, to expand on that really quick with the valuation side, yes, you can get that for minting. But the other thing, Matt, that to me is like the big thing is the tools, right? It's going up and familiarizing yourself with stuff like ENS.vision. Huge shout out to Furion.eth and LCFR developers and the team members over there. ENS.vision is the go-to platform, period, end of story, the go-to platform for people who are interested in getting ENS domains and understanding the value behind them, because it breaks things down into categories. You can splice it, dice it, filter it any which way you want to. But for me, I like to go into the categories and start to understand what the bottom line is on certain types of terms. So you can really unpack it, and like you can filter down to, I only want 5 character domains. I only want 4 character domains. Chopping it up makes it a lot easier to understand and digest by getting price comps. That's the starting place.
We got Apache in the YouTube chat. They said that you might be muted on Twitter. Is that?
I don't know. Can I get just for people that are in Twitter Spaces? Just want to make sure. Can you give me a thumbs up that you can hear Steve? Okay, we can.
Okay.
All right, cool.
All right, just want to make sure that wasn't on everyone's end before we continued.
All right, cool. I love those. I love those strategy plays. I like the fact that you had a deal, actual.eth, which sold in there yesterday. What did that sell for, by the way?
So it did not sell in there. We did have an offer on it for 1.5 yesterday. They decided that after the person who made the offer basically validated their reasoning and then gave additional reasons why they liked it, it was going to be worth more than what they originally wanted. So
maybe the strategy is you go, listen, I don't really want your actual.eth, but if I have to, I'll buy it, because actual is a special word to me. Nobody else. Hey, they got too excited, and the person's like, "Oh, I'm not sure what to evaluate that, but I'm gonna just hold it and feel good." And then next week, if I still feel like selling it, the buying and selling psychology is human beings. We're interesting. We're an interesting group.
Off of that, really quick, Steven, you're a shark. Are you buying these and selling them? The ones you're buying off of Shark Tank, or just in general? Are you investing in these?
Don't you FUD him? Don't you ask? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with buying and selling things. I think that's part of trading.
Steve, are you buying and selling?
It's part of the game, man. Look, I am not at this immediate moment buying and selling a lot. I do buy domains from time to time when it's something that really does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I'm not a short-term, again, big distinction. I'm not a trader. I'm an investor.
Gotcha.
What I invest in and what I purchase in terms of domains, NFTs, digital assets, whether that's an ERC20 or a coin, I'm investing in for the long term.
Gotcha.
2 to 5 year horizon, 5 to 10 year horizon in exclusive cases. But I don't like doing the fast flip. It's not something that I personally like to do. It's not my strategy. It's not, in my investor's thesis. So I do know people that do it. I know people that are absolutely flat out excellent at it. Huge shout out to Guitarman. He's one of the guys that trades and crushes it at it. It's just not for me.
So it is possible then.
Oh yeah. Guitarman's made a couple really phenomenal deals. And he's also another really phenomenal onboarder in the ENS space. So huge shout out to him.
Shout out.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And I just wanted to say that kind of goes to one of the other questions that we wanted to talk about, our conversation pieces, which is HODL. Hold on for dear life. And by the way, I've never been a great trader. I've had a couple really cool sales last year, notables. Probably my most notable one was actually Vivi. And I bought a Superman for 125 gems, which is US dollars, and I sold it for $7,700. So I was able to grab some really good liquidity and then just deploy it at a time where deploying it didn't really go that far because I didn't do the right things. And if I had been smart enough, I would have bought some more donuts, or I would have bought some more pops, or some more K2s. Maybe that's Celestial. No, actually, that's way off. That's out of my league. What I do want to chat with you about is Twitter Spaces, OCM After Dark. That's a powerful space. I just want to dive into maybe 2 most notable things in that, because I want to keep that conversation going. We've got everybody here in Twitter Spaces. Definitely a great group today, and I'm so appreciative that you've given your time, especially to listen to the excellent Mr. Steve Miller. So talk to me about OCM After Dark and 2 most notable things for you.
So like I said earlier on, like to me, the big thing with OCM After Dark is it is a community space. Right. The intent of it is to really create a place where not only the existing fixtures of our community can convene, can network, can introduce OCM to the greater monkeyverse and the metaverse surrounding it. It's also about giving an opportunity for the new members to better connect with people that are ingrained. Again, it goes back to what we said with your network is your net worth. So we do a lot of different programming in there. Everything from just very simple, like call it a town hall recap type of style conversation, to having somebody like Josie Bellini on last week. Josie is a freaking rock star. She's an OG crypto artist, and we can really run the gamut in there. We have a lot of freedom and flexibility in terms of how we run that space, but it always comes back to allowing us to be our authentic selves and to put forth ourselves how we choose to in order to connect. Because creating that connection is just an invaluable thing. It goes back to enrichment, right? It's the idea that E and rise. We're enriching each other's lives by better connecting and figuring out how we can better interface with one another, how we can help one another, and further how we can support each other. You know, I don't think that like necessarily the entirety of ENS Shark Tank has been driven by the OCM community, but I know that I've got a lot of really, really close friends in the OCM community that continue to support me in what I'm doing over on ENS Shark Tank, right? And over time, more people from ENS Shark Tank and other communities that I'm a part of have made appearances in OCM After Dark, not just to like, you know, find their way into the OCM community and buy a monkey, though they should, let's be honest. It's more so because they want to understand what these people are doing uniquely in the space. And that's the right thing to do. Okay. You should be doing your diligence. You should be seeing if it's a fit. If it's not a fit, don't pay money and invest into being in a project that doesn't make sense to you.
You just spoke about a fundamental analytic that I think is incredibly important. Great communities rise. And when you see ENS Maxis, when you see Rotten Antisocial Club, big shout out to Dario, he was in the space earlier. And when you see OCM and other communities coming together in just different spaces, it does a couple things. A, it helps those communities out to continue to promote and I believe congratulate secondary sales, because there's always going to be things available for sale. I mean, the day that it's not, wow. And for how long could that happen? That would make a floor go parabolic. The next thing I do want to go into is the botnet report. And I reached out actually to lorepunk.eth, who is the creative writer for Rotten Antisocial Club. She was actually on our spaces, I believe, last week. And I asked her, I said, get specific. I don't have time to read all 153 pages, but what are the pages to focus on? And she kind of gave me her comments. And so I'm going to read what she wrote. Big shout out to her. Please go follow lorepunk.eth. But I'm going to read what she wrote, and then I want to hear what you have to say, your commentary or your take on it. So she said that she has 3 big takeaway from engagement bots, pages 11 through 13, how to spot an engagement bot, and then gives you the signals on how to spot that bot, methodologies as she referred to it. On page 30, she gave an extra step to look at old projects that you can find out how and if they use engagement bots, along with a statistical analysis, the network of projects getting their bots from possibly the same source. That is it. And then on page 77, the argument that the author of this particular write-up is making is that a bot that has been flagged for engagement, fake, or hyping, creating FOMO around it, fear of missing out, around it. I think that was incredibly important. So she just kind of gave 3 definitive points through that 153 page. Obviously, we got up to 77, which is good. Any more than that, I was like, well, that's too much. Steve, what are your thoughts on what she has to say? And how did you read that report? Was there anything specifically that you took from it? I'm sure you didn't read 153 pages. Maybe you did. I don't know.
So I did a lot of like back checking and fact checking in this report, because like one of the things that people need to understand about reports like this is that there's oftentimes more to it than you're not seeing. And if there's one thing that became really clear to me from the moment that I read the report, is the person who wrote this either A, has a shitload of time on their hands, or B, they got hurt by a lot of projects, because that's the only way that you really would go this deep into trying to uncover something. Out of curiosity, Matt, did you have an opportunity to read this or go through it at all?
No, I heard y'all talking about on the alternate finance spaces. I'm very, I have no idea what this report's even about, to be completely honest with you. There's so much else going on in the Web3 space.
No, it's all good. There's a ton going on right now in Web3. So like, it's not easy to keep up with.
Yeah.
This report, again, like I have to remind people at home, like you have to stay skeptical about what's out there, because until you validate it, you have to live by trust but verify, or better than that, verify, then potentially trust. Right? Because it did come from a guy who, like, I think it was probably less than a year ago, wrote a really, really scathing report trying to assuage people to believe that Kevin Rose was a negative actor in the space, or bad actor. And that's not something that lends necessarily to credibility. When you look at this report, I think the big chunk and the meat of it is found in the takeaways, right? He does actually create a takeaway section at the end. It's powerful. And there are things in there that are material, that are problems in the Web3 space that need to be confronted, that need to be dealt with.
Yeah, I love that.
And by the way, that it's tough.
And by the way, we're just another 15 minutes because again, we're running at about an hour and 20 minutes. Laura, I appreciate that you wanted to come up, but I want to keep this conversation running because we still have some more alpha insight and learning to do. But quick screen share if we can. I'm going to get through some of these things a little bit quicker. I just spoke last night to Eric Choi, who is just a really good person in the space. What was really interesting is that he is sort of behind the technical aspect. I would recommend everybody just go and check him out and follow him. He has a nice Substack, which I'll share in just one more second. Here we go. He is basically a data scientist. I want to make sure that I have this right. Data scientist, software engineer, data science at Harvard, and then math at Notre Dame. Really smart guy, really plugged in. Super humble, but he had written a couple unique threads that I try to follow. And again, I like talking to people in the space that are smarter than I in other areas where they have developed and evolved. We can come back to the multi-screen, see Steve's handsome face. All right. So, the Ryan Carson, the trial of Ryan Carson in Leap, and we're going to just, I'll let you know, Tony, when to cue up the screen share. Not yet. But, what are your thoughts on Ryan Carson and facing backlash? Ryan Carson facing backlash.
So for those that didn't watch this whole thing unfold last week, it was really, really difficult right over the weekend. And it was the fact that Ryan had put out a big announcement regarding this new thing that he was launching called Flux. The long and the short of it is he had made some statements in his tweet thread announcing some of the investors and the founding advisors that he shouldn't have made because he didn't have their approval. He did not have, an actual official yes from them saying that he could announce them as investors. And that's for a person who is a really smart business individual, he even admits that there are times that he can move too fast. This was one of them. And it's one of the reasons why I'm such a big advocate for having a communications member on your team to review what you're going to publish before you do. I have a lot of respect for Ryan. I want to be very clear about that. But what got lost in all of this is, he made a mistake. One of the questions that was constantly brought up in spaces is how many more times will we let Ryan Carson make big missteps in the space until we really hold him accountable and stop allowing him to release projects?
Yeah.
And I sit there, Craig, and I ask myself, and I tried to encourage other people to think about this. Number one, people are vilifying him, and that's not right. Okay. He's a human being. He can make mistakes. But two, I think the measure of an individual, especially in business, and even more so in Web3, is by not necessarily how many mistakes he makes, but the mistakes he repeats. Think about this for a sec. If Ryan Carson, who again has had tremendous success in his past, who has confronted some really big issues, not only in past businesses of his own, but also in terms of PR coming out of Moonbirds and leaving Moonbirds, to now having this issue with Flux, are they the same mistake? Think about that.
You know what? If you repeat a mistake, if you repeat a mistake and I continue to follow you, that's shame on me, right? But I agree with you completely, and I've listened to him before.
Craig, that's the thing. That's what I want people to hear. Yeah. He's not making the same damn mistake.
Right.
Okay. He's learning from his past mistakes. That's the thing that people were not giving this man credit for over the weekend. Yeah, he makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. You need to ask yourself, are they making the same ones? If you are following them, you're right. To Craig's point, it's on you. Right. If you're going to continue to allow that person to have influence over your investing decisions and your choices.
Sounds like people have unrealistic expectations of him based off of his past, his Web2 experience and success.
Yeah.
I love that you just said that. And again, for you to, I don't want to say stick up for him, but for you to speak, clearly as to he's a good guy in the space, he's needed in the space, and he hasn't made the same mistakes. It's good to make mistakes. You fall forward, you get up. If you keep making that same mistake, you watch out. Either it's malicious or it is unintentional. But again, I think he's a good voice for the space. And I hope that behind the scenes, because it kind of unraveled on Twitter Spaces. I was listening to Leap, and I was like, hey, get off. I was thinking to myself subconsciously, get off the Spaces. This is not where this needs to go down. And people have you in here asking whether it's on your space or not, or someone else's. They're asking because, again, they want to sensationalize. I had to slow myself down. Sensationalize for engagement. The last thing that I want to talk about, and by the way, we're going to keep Twitter Spaces going for 15 minutes after the pod. I think it's a smart play. There's a lot of people in there that I'm sure I want to open it up to Q&A and also allow Laura Punk to come on and share her thoughts and ideas. But if we can do a quick screen share, Tony, I want to give one of my alpha. All right. Not financial advice. This guy, Taylor, is who I would recommend that you follow. I like how he's approaching from an artistic standpoint. He's doing something unique. And then obviously I think there is a bit of a similarity among some of the artists, but I like how he is controlling the burning, the contest. He's doing an A or B, so you can get to third and fourth round. But I'm really excited about Taylor. So that's my alpha long-term play. I'm a hodl guy. I am not a just sell the bags tomorrow. So anything that I'm investing in, and the reason you and I drive so close to the OCM and the ENS community and X First, shout out to Don, I see you, is because we believe that they're plugged in consistently and they're there, and also Rask. And there are a number of other communities, but I didn't want to leave anybody out. Steve, from your end, first off, it's been an honor today having you on the podcast. It's a long time in the making. I think we had a great conversation. I always say alpha insight comes in two forms. One is from great information, so you can deploy great tactics authentically. And then the other one is some of those juicy DGen plays. Any last words from your end before we get off of our podcast and then hop into Twitter Spaces for the next, say, 15 minutes?
The biggest thing to me, Craig, is making sure that you pay gratitude forward. And to me, there is, a lot of great things that we spoke about today on the show. And I thank both you and Matt for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure. I guess my parting words to those that are listening to the pod is to, of course, go back, check out the Twitter space afterward, because there are going to be a lot of great takeaways that are shared over there, I'm sure. But continue to be kind to each other, and know that, in the words of a very good friend of mine in the space, Good Things, he and I both believe in the same exact big alpha, and that's that the people are the alpha. Follow the right people, determine those that align with you and what you are truly basing your investor's thesis around, and you'll find that the right opportunities do find their way to you. So be kind, and remember, the people are the alpha.
And by the way, Steve, you're not getting off the hook that quick. We've got about 2 minutes for Matt for the rapid fire. Go for it, my friend.
All right, these are going to be just quick questions. The first one is one I actually asked everybody so far we had as a guest, and this is V-Friends Volume 2 or Alien Friends, two big communities made it to the bear markets. Floor price in 2 years, which one will be higher?
V-Friends, and it's not even close.
Really? You're the only one who actually said it's not. Everyone's like, oh, I love Alien Friends, I love both, but V-Friends, I think V-Friends, and I agree. I think that what Gary Vee is doing is second to none by a long shot as far as that floor price range goes. Any tattoos? Do you have any tattoos?
I have one, and I have plans to get others. I have one, and it actually relates back to my podcasting experience and my time in Twitter Spaces, but I've had it for a while. It's right here, and it reads in Hebrew, let your voice be heard. Because I believe if you have a voice and you have a message that is worth hearing, you should absolutely broadcast it.
Yeah. And I'm not recommending anyone do this, but if you were forced to, if you had to, gun to the head, you had to get one NFT community tattooed.
Wow, that's harsh.
One tattooed onto you, which one would it be and where would it be?
I'm sorry, the one
NFT PFP tattooed onto you. If you had to, gun to no choices.
I know this one.
Which would it be and where would it be?
I want to hear what Craig thinks it is first.
Okay. I was gonna say on Shane Monkey, and I know the one that you would get because of has a very personal meaning to you. Am I right?
I think that it probably would be that one. The trick of it is like, because I put so much of my own identity in my monkey these days, I do kind of want to get my own monkey, but there's a K2 in my collection that is really, really special to me, that like, it's a reminder to me of my grandmother. And I would probably get that one, if I'm being honest with myself.
That's the one I was speaking of.
I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. So speaking of ENS domains, in 5 years, which ENS domain that you own do you think will be worth the most?
Shit.
If you don't say StephenMiller.eth, man, you're off. You're out of here.
I'm curious.
Well, I mean, the thing is, if StephenMiller.eth is not the most expensive one in 5 years, I will have not done myself the service that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build my own brand. But I do think that the most valuable one in the next 3 to 5 years is going to be one of two. It'll either be the whale.eth or the shark.eth or marvingaye.eth. I do believe that he is the greatest love song singer of all time. I was fortunate enough to acquire it, and I have every intent of finding its way to his foundation and to his estate.
Wow.
So I've got big hopes for that one.
Wow,
I love
that's a powerful one. And shalom, my brother. This has been phenomenal today, and we're gonna close it out, and then we're gonna stay live on Twitter Spaces for some Q&A for Steve. Maybe might have a question for me. I don't know if I'm that important today, along with MetaMatt, my co-host. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching CraigO's Crypto Corner, the best in Web3, blockchain, NFT, and cryptocurrency technologies. CraigO signing off.